Look at him. He's a bum. You want to see something funny? You go visit John Bender in 5 years. You'll see how goddamn funny he is.
You've been asking for this video for quite some time now, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry it's taken me so long. We are talking about John Bender from The Breakfast Club today. If you're new, I'm a counsellor. I've been going through each of the characters in The Breakfast Club, one at a time. We've done Alison and Andrew already so far, so watch them if you haven't. And now it's Bender we're going to talk about for a while. But before I start, I just wanted to say thank you for all the support you've shown on these videos so far, and there's been so many good comments on the points that I've missed and new perspectives and everything. I mean, I've never emphasised this enough before, but there's always going to be things I miss, because people are very messy, paradoxical creatures with tons of reasons and explanations behind everything they do, you know. Normally reasons that contradict each other as well. We're not as rational as we like to think we are. And as a result, I obviously can't express and explain every point in these videos, so there will be things I miss out, and anything you think I've left out or forgotten or haven't picked up on, leave a comment, you know, let me know, and let everyone else know, and we can all read it, and it just adds to everything. So thank you for how you've done that so far, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah, and one other point before we begin is the character of Bender does raise some controversial issues. I mean, he straight up sexually harasses Claire in the middle of the film, and nothing big is really made about it, and then she falls for him anyway. Is that because this is the 80s and films were more sexist back then, or was the film trying to make some sort of point? And Randy Rhodes left a comment asking if it's realistic that she would fall for him considering all that. And basically that's all stuff I want to talk about and address properly at some point, but it won't be during this video because otherwise this will be too long. So we will touch on his relationship with Claire a little bit in this video, but it's more something I'm going to save and discuss when I do my video on Claire herself, you know? It's not today's focus, that's what I'm saying, so if it seems a bit like I'm skirting over those points in this video, that's why. Anyway, let's start with Bender's archetype, the criminal. This bad kid who has no respect or care for anything, breaks all the rules, and will never get anywhere in his life. What do you think it would do to a kid if he's told his whole life that he'll never amount to anything? You know, we don't know whether or not that's what Bender's parents say about him, but Vernon definitely does, and Andrew does.
You may as well not even exist at this school.
Sometimes people argue that would give you a motivation to prove the doubters wrong, and maybe it would on some level. You know, some people will be motivated to fight against that image, but what about when things start getting difficult, or those times when things do go wrong? You know, self-doubt will creep in. You'll start thinking in the back of your mind, well, what if they are right, because I made a mess with this thing or with that, and I'm struggling at the moment with how hard it is to achieve. What if everybody's right about me? What if I never will amount to anything? And like the Boogeyman or Slender Man or whatever else, the more you think on it, the more you start to believe it, and the scarier and the stronger the thought becomes until it completely takes over, and suddenly that's your life gone. You've proved the doubt was right. Whatever potential you might have had to achieve has been lost. And the thing is, when people wonder about these bad kids who do bad stuff, they normally boil it down to one simple explanation. They're just trying to impress people, or to be the class clown, or seem cool, that sort of thing.
You want to spend a little more time trying to do something with yourself, and a little less time trying to impress people.
And again, that's Vernon's opinion, and it's Claire's and Andrew's at the beginning of the film. And on some level, maybe that is partly true. You know, the thing about rebelling and being bad in schools is that you do get attention from it, and it does make you stand out, and people are sometimes impressed by the balls of what you do, but to reduce a person down to just that one explanation, I mean, no one is so shallow and one-dimensional that the only reason they do bad stuff is for attention. So in the spirit of giving a few other reasons why Bender might do bad stuff, we'll get into other deeper points later on, but I think I need to start with this. So one reason anyway is that it's deeply important that he never shows fear. Bender has grown up with a dad that physically abuses him, going so far as to put out cigars on his skin. In a family life like that, vulnerability is a weakness that his dad would likely pounce upon, and not just psychologically make him feel weak like with Andrew's dad, but literally. Bender has been taught that his body is a very fragile thing, so naturally he's developed not just a desire but the absolute need to grow up big and strong and brave. It's a matter of survival for him. And in a literal sense, maybe if he gets big and strong and brave enough to stand up to his dad, Dad won't be able to hurt him. And maybe he'll be able to defend Mum as well, although we don't know anything about his mum, so I don't want to speculate about her. But it's as a matter of absolute survival then that Bender needs to show no fear. Any sign of backing down or wavering or showing weakness and his dad would win, because there's two types of losing to this for Bender. He loses physically when his dad is able to hurt him. He'd also lose mentally if Bender submitted, cried, gave into it all. That would feel like a second loss. So Bender never does back down over anything. As we see with Vernon, Vernon's forever trying to get him to submit, like in the scene where he keeps handing out more and more detentions.
I've got you for the rest of your natural born life if you don't watch your step. You want another one? Yes, you got it!
Waiting for Bender to stop and to submit and give up, but he doesn't. It just keeps going until it's actually Vernon who stops. And even then Bender swears at him. And he's got himself 8 weeks worth of detentions from this, so of course he's angry at himself afterwards for not backing down and just sitting quiet and keeping his mouth shut, but he couldn't help it. Vernon was challenging him in a real power play, and backing down just isn't an option for Bender in that scenario. Another reason is that doing bad stuff feels like freedom because, well, I mean, of course it does. Being able to do stuff you've been told not to do literally demonstrates that they don't have control over you. And often that's one reason for rebellion, you know, not so much because the rules you break are important for you to break, but just that you want to demonstrate the idea no one is the boss of me. And it's for these reasons that a lot of teaching methods nowadays revolve around not challenging kids like this directly, because they will not back down. You know, if you get caught in a battle with them, things will just keep on escalating. So you tend to see in small things like the language teachers use nowadays, they say things like, the expectation is that we don't use our phones in class, or whatever. You know, that's less a direct command than just pointing out the general rule. It's the same message, but it feels less confrontational than pointing at them and saying, get off your phone. Anyway, I don't want to get caught on this stuff. There is a lot more I could say, and there is a lot of other reasons why Bender misbehaves, but they're all a bit obvious, and none of it is getting to the heart of what I want to talk about today. So, Bender's a complicated character. As an audience, we all quite like him watching this film, but we all have to wonder how much we're supposed to like him. I mean, especially when he does sexually harass Claire, and he bullies them all to pretty cruel levels at various points in this film. But narratively, on one level, Bender is a force for good, who teaches the characters how to rebel, because to some extent rebellion genuinely is freedom rather than just feeling like it. Maybe not rebellion for the sake of rebellion, because doing the opposite of what you're told to do is still technically conforming, but rebellion can often be a sign of free thinking, of questioning the world and carving out your own path. In that sense, rebellion is a genuinely good thing that all kids need to do on some level if they want to grow up healthy, because it's about learning independence. Like Andrew's character arc that I talked about last time, he's a character that can't think for himself. Bender teaches him how to rebel, and then he can think for himself by the end of the film. So from a narrative standpoint, Bender is kind of like the hero in this film. They're not just rebelling for the hell of it, or because it's fun to talk back to Vernon, but because in getting the door closed, in talking amongst themselves, smoking weed, listening to music, they grow and learn a hell of a lot as people. They develop and learn about each other as well as themselves. And in many ways we see all of that culminate in the dance scene when they just throw their arms about and express something freely. You know, their rage, their joy, excitement, their individualism and their sense of togetherness. All of that is expressed in the act of dancing here, and it's a moment of feeling truly alive. And we can stand up straight, study hard, get a good job, go for promotions and everything else we're supposed to do, but sometimes it takes a moment like this for a kid to discover what feeling alive really means. And in that sense it's interesting to link this idea to the very dance-like way Bender often moves about, which is a brilliant touch to the character by Judd Nelson. This slightly rhythmic feel to his movements sometimes. They feel heavy and full of anger, yet also kind of graceful. And to me, you might disagree with this, but it suggests all his rage doesn't have to just be something destructive and out of control, that it can be a power and a positive force if you can find a way to express it healthily. Anger can be a power when it's channeled properly, let's say. And so from this perspective we could see all of his bullying behaviour as Bender actually trying to do something good. You know, he attacks the other characters because they represent conformity. Straight edge Andrew and Claire and Brian. In Bender's eyes they're kind of like mindless robots, and he wants to shake them and say wake up. And it kind of angers him to see people so stuck in conformity, because perhaps it reminds him of his fragile side and the times he was forced to submit to his dad. perhaps it reminds him of how helpless he felt as a vulnerable little kid who couldn't fight for freedom. Or maybe he's angry at them in the same way he could be angry at his mum for all the time she never stood up and rebelled against Dad. Not that she could be expected to, because Dad was probably much stronger, but Bender always hoped and wished she would. You know, he wished he could shake her into action and say, "Defend me, you're my mum, mums are supposed to keep me safe." Perhaps. You know, as I've said, we know nothing about his mum, so that is pure conjecture that I'm just offering to try and help make it clear why Bender can't stand conformity. It might not be because of that, but it's the same sort of emotional feeling inside. To him, submission represents letting his dad win, so when he sees people who submit to everything, he both wants to free them but also to attack them because he's angry at the fact they would submit. So from this perspective, everything he does is technically meant to try and help them, but because of his anger, he goes about it in a very confrontational rather than encouraging way. He gets right to the heart of who each of them are and stabs with mockery and derision. Brian is the goody-goody study-hard nerd with a picturesque suburban family.
Did your mom marry Mr. Rogers?
Andrew is the mindless brute, the racehorse who follows orders.
I want to be just like you. I figure all I need's a lobotomy and some tights.
Claire is the pristine, spoiled prom queen.
Not fat.
Well, not at present, but I could see you really pushing maximum density.
Allison is an outsider who doesn't really conform, so he leaves her alone, notice. But those three are kind of the embodiment of conformity in Bender's eyes, and he tries to shake them out of it as well as release them from the shallow stereotypes they conform to by mocking them. As Bender himself even explains to Andrew right after bullying Claire.
You don't look at her, and you don't even think about her. You understand me?
I'm trying to help.
And at first they hate him for his bullying, but slowly he does become the group leader and they do rally round behind him because they realise he is actually trying to help, despite his strange methods. Perhaps they realise it best when he sacrifices himself so they don't get in trouble. You know, this is a leader who has been pushing us to improve rather than a tyrant trying to break us. And arguably he succeeds in helping them because all of them do come out of the shallow stereotypes they've conformed to, including Bender himself. Because, like I said, rebellion for the sake of rebellion is still conformity, even if he didn't know it was. But in the end we realise he isn't just this rule-breaking bully, but someone with genuine heart who does care about the others, and seems to genuinely feel for Claire, rather than her just being a photo in his album full of girls that he considers. Claire is a polar opposite to Bender in so many ways, so the fact he would go out with her in the first place suggests he's subverting his own stereotype, that he's stepping out of his own image. And again, their relationship, if we can call it that, isn't that simple, and that's something we'll discuss more in a video on Claire, but you see my point there. However, let me turn this thing around now, because despite saying all this, there are plenty of times where his bullying seems to go far beyond this weird way of trying to help and into genuine torment, such as the sexual harassment, but this in many ways is a clear example to illustrate the point.
You know, I have just as many feelings as you do, and it hurts just as much when somebody steps all over them.
God, you're so pathetic. You got everything, and I got shit. Fucking Rapunzel, right? School would probably fucking shut down if you didn't show up. Queenie isn't here.
And this is just the start of Bender's rant here. It keeps going in this clip for quite a while, and he keeps pushing more and more until Claire is in tears, and it does genuinely feel cruel, because this isn't him trying to help here. This is him angry at Claire for having all the things he ever wanted. And I imagine we also see some of Bender's dad in him here, and it's more obvious with this line.
And as far as being concerned about what's going to happen when you and I walk down the hallways of school, you can forget it, because it's never going to happen. Just bury your head in the sand and wait for your fucking prom.
I hate you.
Yeah? Good.
Those final two lines, you can easily imagine them being said at Bender's home between him and his dad. What's interesting about this as well is that about 10 minutes from now, Bender and Claire are kissing and have coupled up, and yet here he's saying they're never going to be together. I mean, it seems like a contradiction, but really, he already cares for her by this point in the film, because it's the classic psychology thing that the things we most passionately deny are often the things we care about the most. They care so much, they daren't admit it. It'd be painful to let the care in, as we kind of see in this example here with Bender.
When you grow up, your heart dies.
Who cares?
I care.
You can see him sort of shutting himself off here in his reaction, like he's trying to distance himself from Allison's idea because it's too overwhelming for him to think about. Anyway, that's a tangent. The point is, Bender cares about Claire, even when he's bullying her here and reducing her to tears. Partly we can say he does reduce her to tears because she's just talked about the fact none of them here will be friends when they come back to school on Monday, and that idea angers Bender. But that aside, it leads us to a larger point I wanted to talk about, which is the idea of hating the people we love, or more specifically, attacking the people we love. Because I don't think I've touched on this before in any of my videos, but domestic abuse is particularly horrible not just because what's done to you is traumatic, but also that it's done to you by the very people that are meant to love and care for you. That makes it feel incredibly confusing for a child, and the confusion is a feeling of fear in itself because you don't understand why this is happening. Home is meant to be a safe space, so if it's not safe, is anywhere else safe? And Bender's dad probably does care for Bender on some level, like Andrew's dad. He definitely cares for Andrew, but he's also quite warped and too caught up in his own pain to see what he's doing to his son. So there probably is love and care there somewhere, but that, again, only makes it more confusing for the kid, because what does love and care really mean then? What understanding and clear concept can a kid build up when the people who supposedly love him also seem to hate him? Is all this anger and torment a part of love? Is that what it is? And in cases of sexual abuse, the confusion goes a lot further because sex is meant to be an act of love, and the abusers often tell the victims that's what it is, and they lie and say what they're doing is a thing of love and care, and so the concept of love becomes warped and confused with abuse, which then, when you're older and trying to find real relationships, it makes the idea of love and care seem a scary thing that's hard to trust, because how much is it linked to abuse? Obviously that's not the topic today, so I won't go further into that, but the point is we see this confusion playing out in Bender. His way of showing care is so mixed up with anger and violence and everything else, because even within him the two things are very blurred and it's hard to see a distinction. And in a scene where Vernon threatens to beat Bender up, you see this play out.
That's right. And I'm gonna kick the living shit out of you, man. I'm gonna knock your dick in the dirt.
It's brilliant acting from Judd Nelson, because you see some of this confused, lost child revealing itself in his eyes. That confused, slightly scared expression, because a teacher shouldn't be saying things like this. A teacher is supposed to be a symbol of care. Even when you butt heads with them and get in trouble and everything else, there's meant to be lines they don't cross. So, to see those lines being crossed probably unconsciously reminds Bender of the early experiences where his dad was crossing those lines as a parent. It evokes similar feelings in him again. The dynamic between them here possibly reflects the same dynamic Bender has or has had with his dad. So it's then no surprise Bender regularly finds himself crossing those lines in his interactions with others. And it's particularly fitting here after this tirade Bender gives making Claire cry, because the silence is followed by Andrew asking the question,
God, are we gonna be like our parents?
Because Andrew's observed it there. Bender sounds like his dad would sound. And that's an idea Bender refuses to take in here. It's not something he dares to think about, so he says,
Who cares?
and detaches himself from the idea of ever possibly turning into his dad. Which brings us fittingly back to why Bender rebels, and to giving another reason for it. He's fighting the very idea of his dad. He has been since he was a very small boy with a vivid imagination, picturing his dad as this evil monster where he's the protagonist who will slay the dragon, rescue his mum and sweep them off to a happier life. This rebellion he stages against Vernon, trying to bring other characters into it, is like every young adult fantasy book where the protagonist unites the people in an uprising against the tyrannical dictators so that they can all live happily ever after. That's the sort of hope and fantasy that might play out in the mind of a small boy, except what if somewhere along the way, growing up, you start to turn into the evil monster yourself? What if this is second-hand abuse, where you're now treating others as your dad treated you? What if you're becoming the very thing you've been fighting against your entire life? That realisation would be a difficult, painful one, so Bender blocks it here. It's time to start trying to wrap this video up now, so a few extra points I haven't touched on that I probably should have done. The way a lot of the background music seems to come out of Bender's head. Like this is his internal rage just bursting onto the external world. Obviously I haven't talked about his relationship with Claire, if it is a relationship, I'm saving that for her video, so I haven't really talked about anger at all. Considering this is what most of his rebellion and his bullying really boils down to, someone with so much anger that he can't keep it in, and he can't ease it and lull it, it just bursts out upon everything. And his behaviour there also spreads the message, look how out of control I am. Which in many ways you could call a cry for help, though I don't like the phrase cry for help. But it's a sincere expression saying, help me. I'm like a hurricane, my rage takes over and damages every good thing I have. I don't know how to control it. Hence this book we see here of Bender's at the start. Hence setting his foot on fire. In many ways that's the most important message in all of his behaviour, because Bender doesn't feel safe. He's never felt it at home, he's never felt it within himself with all his anger. Right now, nothing and nobody can contain him. Vernon literally locks him in a closet and that doesn't even contain him. Nothing will until Bender can start to learn how to manage and process his emotions, which is also tied to making peace with himself and therefore with authority to some extent. Not all authority, but some, because you'll never find peace if you're at war with absolutely everything. Sometimes that's what kids are telling us in their bad behaviour. They're saying, I don't know how to control myself. I don't even think you can control me. I feel like an unstoppable train wreck, and that terrifies me. The fact is, Bender's got an incredibly hard life. Incredibly hard. Harder than any of the other characters, and not just because of his home life, but also all of society dumps on him. Treats him like someone worthless, who'll spend most of his young adult life being looked down on as a no-good, druggy criminal who'll never amount to anything. Finding his way in life then would be horrendously difficult, but I am an optimistic person. And I think Bender as a character is quite introspective and insightful, he understands people well, and he does genuinely have a lot of heart. Those things are all there. The next decade or however long would be an incredible struggle, but I think he'd stand a good chance of making his way towards a happier place to some extent. Whatever the rest of society may think about him, I reckon he could achieve. Obviously leave your comments. Let me know what I've missed out, what I didn't think of. Let me know if you think I'm wrong, or just whatever it is you think, you know? Like the video if you did like the video anyway, it does help me out, as does subscribing if you haven't and you're thinking about it. Hopefully see you next time.